気分ふわふわしてる心には君方の
Ever wonder how there are so many Nurse Joys in the Pokemon games? We've all been told that it's because they have a lot of sisters, but really, is it possible to have that many genetically identical siblings? Well, you never know, but still, they didn't want to let anyone know the real reason. It's far too unreal and out of character if anyone knew her secret, but I found out. I saw, and I can tell you. It all starts when you walk into Pokemon. It all starts when you walk in the Pokemon Center. You walk up to her and see her bright pink hair. You greet her, and she has this pretty voice that wasn't actually pretty to start with. You may or may not have a talk. She takes your Pokemon, turns around, heals them, and gives them back. That's the usual routine. Most likely, she'll be all nice and caring through the whole process, give or take the personality she has, because supposedly each one is unique in personality. What you don't know is that she installed a tracking device in your Pokeballs, all 6 of them, in case one falls off. Why? Well, when you entered the building, she knew you'd be perfect. She knew you had the characteristics. She knew you had the characteristics for the job. Plus, you were still a new trainer. She knew you had the characteristics for the job. Plus, you were still a new trainer. The less known, the better. Anyway, she keeps you tracked and alerts the other Nurse Joys you might encounter. That way, when you get to one of them, well, let's just say they can take care of you. However, if one of the Nurse Joys sees a trainer they want and stays in the center to sleep overnight, their real fun begins. You're assigned to a room, most likely a room near the back of the Pokemon Center. Can I take your Pokemon to another room so they can be healed and rested? She may ask. Say no. Just say no. It's their way to isolate you. All of your belongings can go in this drawer so you can lock it and keep your items safe while you sleep, she says in her voice you know but will soon not love. The Joys do this to keep you unarmed. Of course, you trust these kind nurses, so all the items you had go in the drawer, and she gives you the lock. Good night. Please enjoy your rest. She tries to comfort you, but if you look closely, you may notice the face fake she has, because almost always they're full of excitement before the procedure happens. Can you guess the real reason now? If yes, then well done. If not, keep reading. At about midnight, usually when it's all dark and no living thing is up and about, except for our lovely and sadistic little nurse, it all begins. The door to your room gently opens. There is no squeak or creaking noise because she was smart enough to oil the door so no sound is made when it's opened. She comes in with a gurney, you know, those medical stretch things they use to carry injured people. Her face is not sweet anymore, but more devilish. She enjoys this ritual. She loves it, the rush, the adrenaline. She enjoys this ritual. She loves it, the rush, the adrenaline she gets, the red glow in her eyes. It's as if she's possessed by the devil himself. Although you're sound asleep, she doesn't take any chances, so she takes out a needle. No, it's not poison, silly. It's a liquid from sleep powder. No, it's not poison, silly. It's a liquid form of sleep powder. In a very high dose. An ounce could keep you asleep for, say, 2 hours. This needle has... An ounce could keep you asleep for, say, 2 hours. This needle has 10. She needs all the time she can get for the procedure to be successful. So you're knocked out on a gurney, being pushed down the hall into a room that's been disguised as the nurse's only room. If you ever somehow manage to see what's inside, here's what you would see. Severed limbs, appendages at different sizes in jars, only ones that didn't transform pop. If you ever somehow manage to see what's inside, here's what you would see. severed limbs and appendages of different sizes in jars, only ones that didn't transform properly. There are also testicles. Yeah. She cuts them off. She drags the male's body underneath a saw tool, and that slices them off. No. There are also testicles. Yeah, she cuts them off. She drags the male's body underneath a saw tool that slices them off. She doesn't mind the bleeding. Actually, she collects it through the drain and jars it. For when she needs a drink. After all, the Joys need a constant supply of blood. Now, the next part is her favorite. Joy takes out a knife and slices it down from the base of your neck to your groin. She does this very gently because she enjoys it, and if you were to wake up, then you can suffer slowly. At this point, Joy's hair is not neat. It's covered with blood. Her face is completely changed. Her pupils completely blood red, and teeth have suddenly grown a bit, causing them to look like fangs. No, she's not a vampire. Well, she could be, but that's not the point. Joy then has a smile that is a mix of a clown and a demon because she takes out a bottle of serum with special DNA molecules in it. Joy DNA molecules to be exact. But before she does anything with it, Joy takes out all of your organs, except for a couple like your heart and brain. She stitches your open incision, but it's not a decent job. After all, it won't matter. The serum needs to be directly poured on the brain for it to work, so naturally, Joy will take out a saw. A regular old saw, and slice your skull just enough for the brain to be showing. The serum is poured, and after a few minutes your body is becoming more Joy-like. The heart and brain are revived, while new organs, Joy organs, grow in the empty cavity that the heart and brain are revived, while new organs, Joy organs, grow in the empty cavity that is your body. All your cuts are healed, and it was as if you had perfect skin. The process is complete. You wake up the next day wanting to work at a Pokemon Center. Anywhere would do, but you also have a DNA molecule forcing you to look out for minor trainers that could be the next Joy. Of course, with this comes the ability to do what has been done to you. The thing is, you think you were born identical to other Nurse Joys. But why go through the trouble of making people turn into Joys? Why not just clone? Well, I found out that the original Joy would like to someday rule the world with an army of Joys that will do anything because it's in their DNA to follow the original, but cloning would attract too much attention. Plus, the whole "I have a lot of sisters that are identical" story seems to have been a good one. There you have it, now you know. Wonder how I know this? Well, who's always with Nurse Joy? Who's the one in the background helping her? It's me, Chansey. Though I was told not to ever speak of this information, even though I am a Pokemon. So my advice to you is, come to the Pokemon Center at your own risk. You never know. The thing about the real Nurse Joy is, she likes to hunt around by herself, so when you're all alone, sleeping, or just relaxing, don't think you'll be safe. I hear she has a nice demonic face to stare at you with. Oh. It looks like she just chose another victim. I think it's you. The first piece of film ever created was made in the year of 1877. This film was under the title of Test. We found it in a warehouse that belonged to my best friend's long-dead grandfather. As the title says, this was simply a test film and nothing more, or that's what the title would lead you on to believe. Back in those days, a recording could only go on for less than a minute. Anyone going into this wouldn't expect much. Surprise, it wasn't much at first. This film was like all early films, black, white, and soundless. Also, incredibly dull. It was 35 seconds long and consisted of a man wearing a black suit walking on an empty sidewalk and a large crowd of people on the sidewalk opposite of him. It was nothing special, and again, it was only a test, but one thing was very strange about this film. After viewing it 10 times in one sitting, we started to notice the small changes that would occur every time we watched it. Sometimes a man sitting down on a bench would be slightly moved over to the right or the left. Sometimes a woman wearing what looked to be a light gray dress would then be wearing a dark gray dress. It was just small, almost unnoticeable changes. This was fascinating to the few that watched the film, myself included. This was also completely impossible, but somehow it was happening. The small group and I continued to watch for about 10 minutes. The changes became bigger, more noticeable, and more terrifying. One time it was a minor car accident and the two drivers came out yelling at each other. Nothing too bad. Another time it was a couple arguing. Then we got 20 minutes in and things changed drastically. Sometimes the crowd of people walking would change into a crowd of people fighting, brutally assaulting each other using blades, blunt weapons, and sometimes guns. Sometimes the crowd would be replaced by a pile of bloody, sometimes dismembered bodies. Things just got worse and worse from there. A man slamming a baby repeatedly on the pavement. A woman gutting a man while a child shoved her own thumbs into her very own eyes. A man in a wheelchair set on fire and pushed down the street between the two sidewalks. Horrible, awful things happened, and they just got progressively worse and worse. After about 35 minutes, we all started hearing sound coming from the film. This was also impossible. Every film made back then was incapable of having sound. This made things so much worse. It's one thing just to watch people die, but having to hear their cries and screams and such makes it so much harder to bear. We could now hear the sound of knives cutting through the flesh of the victims, the screams of children as they're tortured, the sounds of explosions coming from off screen. Eventually, the building behind the sidewalk opposite of the lone man had disappeared completely and showed off two towers side by side, the Twin Towers. We all knew what was coming next. The first plane hit, next play, second plane hits. Next play, people are jumping off the building and in the ground, making horrible sounds. This film was made in 1877. There should be no possible way for this to be happening. It showed off multiple other tragedies: the Columbine shooting, VTech, the Colorado theater shooting, public executions by the Nazis, and many more. That's when I noticed one thing hadn't changed this whole time. The man in the black suit walking on the sidewalk hadn't changed once at all. His movements, suit, face, hair color, skin color, height, everything remained the same. The sidewalk as well never changed. This is when I gave him the moniker the Deathbringer. Eventually, I started to feel physically and mentally sick. I felt like I was gonna vomit. I felt tired, ridiculously hungry, insane, dizzy, cold. I felt like I was dying. I passed out on around 60 minutes of viewing. I woke up hours later. Apparently, the others had passed out as well. We were all bleeding from our nose and mouth. We looked up and saw one last play on the projector. It was the Deathbringer, walking on the sidewalk outside of the building we were watching the film in. When he reached the end of the street this time, he started turning his head to the building, and then the projector died. Since then, we've had the film taken away from us by what I assumed to be the FBI or CIA people or something like that. We were told not to say anything, but as you can see, that didn't stop me from talking. Not like anyone's gonna believe me anyway. That's why those guys aren't keeping an eye on me. Well, at least I hope not. Anyway, we were then taken to a hospital to be checked out. Surprisingly, we had nothing wrong with us physically, but mentally was the complete opposite of okay. Since then, my memories of that night have become very blurry. Initially, I started writing this as an attempt to remember more from the incident, but as I continued to write, I found out that I really don't want to remember. I don't want to remember a goddamn thing. I have nightmares every night of horrible, awful things now, something like that film would have shown. It's been that way for the past year and I've had it. As for my friends that were in that group, I haven't heard anything from them, and they've since been reported missing. Apparently this happened over a time span of 1 year, but I didn't even know until I attempted to reach one of them through their family. I didn't keep in contact with them. I didn't really want to. If I talked to them, that would only result in my memories of that night becoming even clearer. Damn it. I didn't keep in contact with them. I didn't really want to. If I had talked to them, that would only result in my memories of that awful night becoming even clearer. To be honest, I was relieved to hear that they were missing. Since they're gone, my memories of that night will be forever obscured. I guess I knew that I really didn't want to remember that night subconsciously. I see no reason to keep going on like this. Ever since that day, I stopped going outside less and less. I see no reason. Damn it. I see no reason to keep on going like this. Ever since that day, I stopped going out less and less, and I'm now starving. But I can't build up the courage to go out. Why? Because sometimes at night, when I look outside, I swear that I see a man in a black suit walking on the sidewalk opposite of my house. Emily's a brave girl. She could fend for herself and didn't need to be the damsel in distress. She's funny, smart, bubbly, and cheerful. Her smile lit up a room. She was beautiful, as if that even mattered. No matter what she looked like, I would love her anyway. I love Emily, in case you didn't notice. What was not to love about her? Pretty, smart, and cheerful. It was all I could ever want. She had these quirks, too. She said she hated them, but I thought they were cute. Sometimes she'd make this little squeak type of noise when she was Sometimes she'd make this little squeak type of noise when she was Sometimes she'd make this little squeak type of noise when she was surprised. Other times, if she was caught off guard, her eyes would widen and she'd be 10 times as more beautiful as before. It was adorable. She looked so innocent like that. She had 2 solid best friends, but she wasn't afraid to make new ones. She was confident but modest. She was always nice to anyone she met. Anyway, Emily was pretty brave during the day, but night is when I realized how vulnerable she really is. Emily loved reading, just like me, and when it got really late, she'd sometimes sneak into the living room and Emily loved reading just like me, and when it got really late, she'd sometimes sneak into the living room and read a book with only the light from her cell phone. Don't ask me why she did it. It was strange, but the only part I care about. Don't ask me why she did it. It was strange, but the only part I cared about was when she went into the hallway. She'd go into the hallway and it would be pitch black. Sure, the phone would help a little, but not really. At that weird time of night, I bet so many monsters must run through Emily's head, grabbing her and dragging her away from her family forever. So she runs all the way down her hall and into the bed. She giggles a little bit when she gets out of bed, probably scolding herself for being so scared. She turns on her iPod and sleeps through the night calmly, probably forgetting ever being scared in the first place. While Emily sleeps peacefully, I stay awake. Emily thinks monsters will attack her in plain sight, but she's wrong. Emily thinks it's her imagination, but she's wrong again. When she falls asleep, I carefully climb over her and lay down beside her. She doesn't stir when I turn on my side to stare at her. I wonder at these times what it would be like to grow old with Emily. I stare at her for what seems like forever. Then I lean in closer, so close I can hear her whole face in perfect clarity. Here? What? I stare at her for what seems like forever. Then I lean in closer, so close I can see her whole face in perfect clarity. My God, she really is beautiful. Then I kiss her. She doesn't wake up. She doesn't jump away. All she does is lay limp. I close my eyes, feeling her lips warm mine. For a fleeting moment, I almost feel, well, alive. But it's only for a moment, and when I open my eyes and back away, my heart sinks. I'll never know what it is to sit with Emily in the summer, holding her soft hand. Her scent lingers on my fingertips, but only for a brief second. It never lasts long enough. It never will. I get out of her bed, readjust her covers, and look down at her. She really is beautiful. I will always love Emily, even when she jumps away from my shadow, even when she pretends not to see me day in and day out, even when she lies about dreaming of me, even when she opens her eyes to see me, and even when she screams. I never liked Emily. Not that she ever actually did anything to me. She just had that sly, knowing look in her eyes all the time. And that "I know something nasty about you" grin. Like she'd listen to all your secrets but tell everyone if she could. She had a way of turning up when you weren't expecting her, too. Uninvited, but there she'd be, grinning, knowing that she'd surprised you, and that even though you hadn't really wanted her around, your mom would just sigh and say, "Well, she's like family. I can't think why you don't like her, and she's never done anything to you, has she? Of course I'm not gonna send her away, don't be silly." So, I decided to make Emily go away for good. I went with her to the park, and while crossing the bridge over the little lake there, I pushed Emily through the fancy railing and into the cold lake. It was harder than I thought, but I got her through and watched as she sunk under the surface. Relieved, I skipped back home, Emily free forever. My mother didn't even ask me why she wasn't with me. Probably because when I got up to my room, there was Emily, sitting on my bed, grinning that sly, "I know a secret" grin, still damp from the lake. God help me, I'm going to scream. Who knew dolls could swim? The deep web is one of the most amazing things on Earth. Not because of how joyful it makes people or anything, but because it's a completely uncensored view of people. You can speak your mind, buy what you want, do anything you want. When on the deep web, you have complete and total freedom. I'd always been fascinated by the deep web, and at the time the events in this story occurred, I was in college. Lots of people at my campus had really been getting into accessing the deep web. It was almost like a trend. With so many people getting on it, it seemed perfectly safe for me to give it a try. Now, I had always heard of the deep web horror stories of hacking, stumbling on disgusting sites, and people even somehow finding... Now, I had always heard of the deep web horror stories of hacking, stumbling on disgusting sites, and people even somehow finding your address. These stories were mainly what kept me off the deep web, but with most people at my college using it on a normal day... Now, I had always heard of the horror stories... Damn it. Now, I'd always heard of the deep web horror stories, stories of hacking, stumbling on disgusting sites, and people even somehow finding your address. These stories were mainly what kept me off the deep web, but with most of the people at my college using it on a normal basis, I decided to give it a go. I asked a friend to come over and help me set it up. When my friend arrived, we opened up my laptop and began to set everything up. He told me that we were using Tor, a program that lets you access the deep web. He also asked me if I was planning on doing anything illegal, to which I replied, no. He said that since I wasn't, we didn't need to install Tails, which is apparently a software that makes it more secure if you plan on doing illegal things. A little while later, everything was set up. I had my new IP address, and my friend gave me a brief rundown on what to do and what not to do. He made it very clear that when I was using the hidden wiki, that I kept it on censored mode, so that it would be less likely for me to see something I didn't want to see. After about 2 weeks of using the deep web, I felt like a pro. I had access to many different sites, spoken with some great people, made friends, even bought some weed. I had become cocky and was ready to dig deeper into the dark web. I turned off the censored mode on the hidden wiki and began to browse the links. It took a while, mostly because Tor is a bit slow, and many of the links just led to dead web pages. Eventually, I stumbled onto a site called All the Gore. It was mainly a big chat room with many different topics. I had a fairly strong stomach. I had seen many violent movies, and I'd seen beheadings, killings, etc. through the normal internet. After looking at a few different chat rooms, I noticed how sick this site really was. The people in these chat rooms were actual killers, bragging about some of the things they'd done. In the chat room, you could also post pictures. One man by the name of Culture045 had the stage in one of the chat rooms. He was explaining in detail how he had broke into someone's house, kidnapped a little girl, and brutally killed their parents by hiding under their bed and then opening their throats. He then explained how he brought the little girl back to his house, raped her, beat her, and cut her up. I didn't think he was telling the truth at first, but then he posted pictures. These were the most horrifying pictures I'd ever seen. Close-up of the poor 8 to 10-year-old girl being brutally raped, beaten, and cut with a knife. Culture kept posting pictures. The new ones were of the girl tied to a chair, bleeding, crying, throwing up. Culture kept posting pictures. The new ones were of the girl tied to a chair, bleeding, crying, throwing up, and so on. Then he showed a picture of him with a drill, drilling into a skull. The most haunting part is that while he was doing it, he was looking at the camera with sheer joy on his face. I'd seen enough and typed in the chat room window, "You people are sick and deserve to die. How can you sleep at night?" Immediately, people began making fun of me, saying that I was just as helpless and ignorant as the little girl in the picture, and that I should get off the big boy part of the internet. They began saying I was a pussy, calling me an empath, when Culture typed something in the chat box. He said, "Really? Where do you live, buddy? I'm sure everyone would love to see you on this site." I then made the biggest mistake of my life and typed, "I'm calling the police and having this site shut down." Less than a minute later, everything on the site went black and a new chat box appeared in green. In it, someone In it, someone named Admin1 typed in the box. He said, "Call the cops and you'll regret it." I didn't type anything in the box. I reached for my cell phone. What happened next haunts me to this day. My phone said I had a new message. I opened it, and it said, "Call the police and you're dead." There was no number. It didn't even say unknown number, it was just blank. I looked back at my laptop and saw my webcam. Light turn on. I quickly covered it, but on the screen I saw a picture of me looking at my phone. I got wide-eyed and froze for a moment when the admin typed again, "Put the phone down right now and uncover your webcam." I put my phone down but kept the webcam covered when he typed again, "Okay then, be like that." Right after, he posted my full name, age, and address in the chat box and typed, "It would be a shame if you and your college buddies were missing, wouldn't it?" he said. I then did as he said and uncovered my webcam. He then told me to follow his instructions on how to make it impossible for me to reach the site again. I followed each and every one. When I finished, I got a text that said, "Now don't ever try and come back." Just like before, it had no number. I still called the police from my friend's phone, but they were never able to find the site. If you ever go on the deep web, don't ever just mindlessly explore, especially if you don't have additional software to keep you more secure. I was a stupid college kid, and I hope no one makes the same mistakes as I did. I moved to a different home and changed all my information, but I still get nightmares to this day. This happened a few days later. I was extremely rattled by what had happened. The police tried to track down the website, but since there was no way for them to recover my history, and I had originally found the sick site just by randomly clicking links, it seemed pretty hopeless to find it. The police told me to change all my information about myself and to move in with a friend. After changing pretty much all my information, I decided to move in with my friend David. David was an extremely honest, hard-working person. He never went to parties, slacked off, got drunk or high. He was very dedicated to finishing college. In fact, he was one of the few kids I knew at the time who wasn't getting on the deep web regularly. I told him all about my experience with the deep web, and that's mostly why he agreed to let me stay with him. One night we were both up studying very late when my phone went off. I looked to see who had texted me and saw that the person sending the message had no number, just like last time. It read, "Check your computer." There was nothing else to it, just one simple instruction. I opened my laptop, and when I did, I noticed that I didn't have control of the mouse. I tried to move it, but the mouse had just moved on its own. Someone had remote access to my computer somehow. I never gave anyone remote access before. I tried a whole bunch of keyboard commands, but not a single one worked. I noticed that whoever had control of my laptop was downloading a software, most likely malware, but there was nothing I could do. I heard my phone go off again, and this time the message said, "Look out your window." I was sitting right by a window. I didn't know which window the guy was referring to, so I looked out the one I was sitting by and saw a man in the parking lot leaning up against a white van. He had a phone in his hand, and when I looked at him, he nodded. My phone went off again. Type in and hold down Shift Alt F5 at the same time to activate the software. I called in David to my room to show him what was going on. He seemed just as nervous as I was, but with the man just outside our window, we didn't want to anger him. David called the police right away and told me that they would be there soon. I didn't activate the software and just sat there. Eventually I got another text. I'm coming in if you don't do it right now. I didn't know why he or the person in control of my computer couldn't do it, but I didn't dare to ask. At the same time though, I was 99% sure this program had malware or spyware as something that would be very harmful to my computer, so I refused to activate it. David grabbed a baseball bat just in case the man outside tried to come in. About 5 minutes later, we heard the doorknob turning. It was locked, but then we heard banging at the door. We both freaked out, and I looked out the window again. Sure enough, the man and the van were gone. The banging on the door got more and more violent, until eventually we heard a horrible scratching sound. It lasted a few more minutes, and then we heard footsteps walk down the hall, and eventually fade away. I received another text. We will be back. That really got to me. When the cops arrived, they told me to look at my door. I followed them back into the hallway and saw engraved in our door, my name. The police began investigating the whole building, and they had a tech police officer come in and look at my computer. He began to do scans and investigate the weird software on my laptop. Eventually, he managed to close and removed it, and told me that my laptop isn't safe. He said the core files of it have been hacked. Into and corrupted. We did a complete wipe of my laptop and he looked at my phone as well. Just like last time, he couldn't tell where the messages came from and told me that they would be sure to keep some cops nearby in case this ever happened again. The next day, I had just got home from school and was really tired. David wasn't home yet, so I went into my room and fell onto the bed. I had just begun to close my eyes when I heard a rattling sound in my closet. I lifted my head up and didn't hear it again, so I went back to sleep. After a few minutes, the closet door swung open. I leaped out of bed and saw a man with a mask walking over to me. I ran to the door and slammed it behind me. I ran out to the parking lot, started my car, and drove away as fast as I could. By the time the police arrived, the man was of course gone. The apartment surprisingly hadn't been wrecked or anything. We didn't even find anything stolen. He didn't seem to do anything at first. This night, 2 police officers were monitoring everyone who came in and out the building in order to catch the man. I opened my laptop and noticed that my wallpaper had changed. It was just a bunch of trees, but it had been changed to a sickening photo of a man with a mask. The same mask that I saw on the man who was in my closet, digging a knife into a baby's eye in what looked like a small cabin. I also noticed that all my applications and programs were gone, and I saw the same software as last time, right in the middle. I clicked on it, and it had already been installed, just like last time. It filled the entire screen in what looked like a live screen. I opened my laptop and noticed that my wallpaper had changed. It was just a bunch of trees, but it had been changed to a sickening photo of a man with a mask. The same mask that I saw on the man who was in my closet, digging a knife into a baby's eye in what looked like a small cabin. I also noticed that all my applications and programs were gone. I saw the same software as last time, right in the middle. I clicked on it, and it had already been installed. Just like last time, it filled the entire screen, and what looked like a live stream was going on. I couldn't exit out, and the live stream was coming from a boy's house. He looked about 13 or 14 and was at his computer. It didn't take long for me to see that I was watching through his webcam, as he had no idea. It didn't take long It didn't take long for me to see that I was watching through his webcam and that he had no idea. I saw a small chat box pop up in the top right of the screen, and in it, someone typed in the box, I saw a small chat box pop up in the I saw a small chat box pop up in the top right of the screen, and in it, someone typed, "Welcome to our live stream. We are glad everyone could be here. Thank you, John, for being here as well." My eyes got very wide. My name was John, and they were waiting until I was watching to start it. As I watched, I saw that the closet door began. What? As I watched, I saw that the closet door behind the poor boy slowly opened, and a man walked out with a toolbox in one hand. He quietly set the toolbox down and pulled out some duct tape. He went behind the kid and put the tape over his mouth and grabbed him tight. The poor kid's face was of total fear. He tried to scream, but he couldn't because of the tape. They were making a decent amount of noise, so that told me that the kid must have been home alone. I tried hard to exit, but I couldn't. I then saw the man take out a screwdriver and drive it into the kid's chest. Blood began to pour out, and the kid made an awful wheezing type noise. I saw tears come from his eyes as this sick man began to drive the screwdriver deeper and deeper and then yank it out. The man then took out a hammer and smashed the kid's hands several times till they were nothing more than a mangled bloody mess. I tried every command I could to exit out, but nothing was working. I noticed that in the chat box, several people were cheering. the man on and requesting for him to do different things to the boy. The man then took out a handheld electric saw, pressed it against the boy's face, and turned it on. The boy screamed with pain as the saw went up his eye, causing blood to go everywhere and get on the camera a little as well. I started to get tears in my eyes as I couldn't stop it. Then the man took the screwdriver, gouged out the kid's eyes, and took out a large knife. He proceeded to slit the boy's throat and tossed him on the ground. I was sick. I threw up all over the floor when I looked. And when I looked back, I saw in the chat box people typing in horrible things like "fap, fap, fap," or "oh my god, that was so wonderful, thanks so much for doing this," and so on. In the box, I saw someone named Culture045 type into the box, "Thanks for watching, John." After that, the program closed on its own and I was left with the sickening wallpaper. I was sweating, breathing heavy, and feeling sick. Throughout the whole thing, I didn't realize that my phone had gone off several times. I looked at it, and the most hateful, mean messages were coming from my friends and family. I asked my mom what was wrong, and she texted back, "You sent that sick, disturbing live stream to everyone. I can't believe who you are. The police have been called." I felt even more sick than before. Those monsters had sent that live stream to all my friends somehow and made it come from me. They had pretty much ruined my life within a couple minutes. When the police arrived, I told them everything that had happened, and quickly they managed to explain it all to my friends and family. They really cracked down on finding these people, and a month later, 4 men had been arrested. One was Culture045 and the other was Admin1. And the two others were working with them. The site was found and shut down as well, and I got a new laptop and phone. I could say some horror cliche here and say that something like I could say some horror cliche here and say something like I kept getting texts or kept hearing weird things ever since, but none of that happened. They were arrested, and I never heard anything further. It's good to know that these men are in jail or perhaps even dead, but what scares me is all the other people watching the livestream who were there for pleasures. It's good to know that those men are in jail or perhaps even dead, but what scares me is that all the other people watching the livestream who were there for pleasure are still out there, and that there is probably thousands of other people like Culture 045 out there all over the world. If you ever go on the deep web, make damn sure you're as careful as possible. It was a nice summer day. My 5-year-old son, James, was playing outside in the backyard of our suburban home. James had always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends, but he has always had a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog Fido when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it was he could be talking to. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single dad, it's hard for me to always keep an eye on my son, so I decided to go outside and check on him. When I went into the backyard, I was a bit confused, because James was the only person back there. Was he talking to himself? I could have sworn I heard another voice. "James, it's time to come inside," I called out to him. He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey sandwich. "James, who were you talking to out there?" I asked. James looked up for a moment. "I was playing with my new friend," he said, smiling. I poured him some milk and continued to pry as any good father would. "Does your friend have a name? Why didn't you ask him to have lunch with us?" I asked. James stared at me for a moment before replying, "His name is Laughing Jack." I was a bit taken back by what he said. I was a bit taken back by what he said. "Oh, that's a strange name. What does your friend look like?" I asked, a bit confused. "He's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants with stripy socks, and he always smiles." I realized that my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it's normal for kids his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real kids to play with. It's probably just a phase. The rest of the day went by as per usual, and it was starting to get late, so I put James to bed. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not long after. I had an awful nightmare. It was dark. I was in some kind of rundown amusement park. I was scared, running through an endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The price stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with sick gin. Everything was black and white. The price stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with sick grins stitched on their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there wasn't another living thing in sight. Then suddenly, I began to hear music playing. The sounds of Pop Goes the Weasel being played on a squeeze box echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tune to the circus tent, almost in a trance, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight shining on the center of the big top. As I walked toward the light, the music slowed down. I found myself singing along, unable to stop. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought was all in fun. The music stopped right before its climax, and suddenly the lights shot on. The intensity of the lights was practically blinding. All I could see was a small... The intensity of the lights was practically blinding. All I could see was a small, dark Damn it. How? The intensity of the lights was practically blinding. All I could see was its small, dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then another one appeared. Then another one appeared? What? Then another one appeared. And another. And another. There were dozens of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen. All I could do was watch as the haunting figures drew nearer. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each one, I noticed that they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some had cuts all over their body, others were severely burned, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh. Why? Why the fuck do I have to deal with this? Okay. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground and tearing inside me. Nope, that's not it. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground and tearing inside me. As the children tore me apart, I faded away. All I could hear was laughter. Horrible, awful, evil laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw... After taking a few deep breaths, I looked... Damn it. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over... Damn it. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked... Fuck. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James's action figures were positioned facing me on the... Oh my god. After taking a few deep breaths, After taking a few deep breaths, I noticed... No, that's not... What? How? After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James's action figures were positioned... I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James's action figures were positioned facing me on top of my nightstand. I sighed. James had probably woken up early and put these here. I gathered up the toys and made my way to James's room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed the toys back into his toy box and headed out the living room. A little while later, James woke up and I made him his breakfast. He was quiet and seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep well either. I decided to ask him about the toys. James, honey, did you put the toys in Daddy... I decided to ask him about the toys. James, honey, did you put the toys in Daddy's room this morning? His eyes shot up at me for a moment, then quickly glanced back down at his cereal. Laughing Jack did it. I rolled my eyes and responded, "Well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room." James nodded and finished up his breakfast, then decided to go play out in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room, and I must have dozed off because I woke up a couple hours later. Shit, I need to check on James. No, that's not the right fucking cadence for that shit. One more time, okay. I went to relax in the living room, and I must have dozed off because I woke up a couple hours later. Shit, I need to check on James. I was a bit worried. It had been over 2 hours and I hadn't checked on him. I stepped out into the backyard, but James wasn't there anymore. I was getting nervous, so I called out to him. "James! James, where are you?" Just then I heard a giggle come from the front yard. I rushed through the gate, around to the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk. I breathed a sigh of relief and walked over to him. "James, how many times have I told you to stay in the backyard?" "James, what are you eating?" James looked up at me, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of candies in all color. James looked up at me, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of hand candy. James looked up at me and then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of hard candies. James looked up at me and then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of hard candies in all colors. This made me very nervous. "James, who gave you that candy?" James just stared at me, not speaking. "James, please tell Daddy where you got that candy." James hung his head down and said, "Laughing Jack gave it to me." My heart sunk. I kneeled down to look him in the eye. "James, I've had enough of this damn Laughing Jack thing. He is not real. Now this is a very serious situation and I need to know who gave you the candy." I closed my eyes. What? I could see my son's eyes tear up. "But Dad, I could see my son's eyes tear up. "But Dad, Laughing Jack, motherfucking piece of crap." 1, 2, 3, okay. I could see my son's eyes tear up. "But Dad, Laughing Jack gave me the candy." Did gave me, yeah. Oh. I could see my son's eyes tear up. "But Dad, Laughing Jack gave..." I could see my son's eyes tear up. "But Dad, Laughing Jack did give me the candy." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James has never lied to me, but what he's telling me is impossible. I made him spit out the candy and throw the rest. I made him spit out the candy and I threw the rest away. James appears to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom and Linda from next door or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm gonna have to keep a closer eye on James. That night, I put James to bed as usual and decided to go to bed myself. Suddenly, I was woken up by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurled down the stairs. It's a funny visual. Suddenly, I was woken by a loud... Motherfucker. Suddenly, I was woken up by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had been thrown on the floor and our dog Fido hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy, the same type that James was eating earlier that day. My shock was quickly broken by a sharp scream coming from James's room, followed by loud crashes. I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with speed that only a mother who's... Nope, that's not it. I quickly grabbed the knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with the speed that only a dad whose mother and his... What? What? Oh, my dad's sleep deprived. Come on. You know what? What if I just leave the mistakes in? Yeah. That would be fun. Alright, let's do that. I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with the speed that only a father whose child is in danger could have. I burst through the door and flicked on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor, and my poor son in it... Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son in his bed... Oh wait, did I read that? Did I read that right? Yes. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son in his bed, crying and shaking with fear. A pool of urine staining... Damn it. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son in his bed, crying and shaking with fear. A pool of urine staining the sheets. I scooped up my child and ran out the house and went next door to Tom and Linda. Luckily, they were still awake. They let me use their phone and I called the police. It didn't take them long to arrive and I explained what had happened. They looked at me as if I were crazy. They searched the house, but all they found was a dead dog and trashed... They searched the house, but all they found was a dead dog and 2 trashed rooms. The officer told me that someone had probably gotten into the house and done this right before making a quick escape. The officer told me that someone had probably gotten into the house and done this right before making a quick escape. You gotta be kidding me. The officer told me that someone had probably gotten into the house and done this right before making a quick escape when they heard me coming up the stairs. I knew that wasn't true. All the doors were locked and none of the windows were open. Whatever was in my house didn't come from outside. The next day, James stayed inside. I did not want him to leave my sight. I went into the garage and found his old baby monitor and set us up in a... I went into the garage and found his old baby monitor and set it up in his room. If anything comes into it tonight, I was going to be able to hear it. I went into the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife from the drawer and put it on my nightstand. Imaginary friend or not, I'm not letting anything hurt my little boy. Soon enough, night came. I put James to bed. He was afraid, but I promised that I wasn't gonna let anything happen to him. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and turned on the nightlight. Before closing the door, I whispered to him, "Good night, James. I love you." I tried to stay up as long as I could, but after a few hours I felt myself drifting off. My baby would be safe for the night and I needed to sleep. Just as I lay my head on the pillow, I heard a soft noise come from the baby monitor I had put on the... I'm reading too fast. Just as I lay my head on the pillow, I heard a soft noise come from the baby monitor I had put on my nightstand. At first, it sounded like interference. Like the kind of radio... At first it sounded like interference, like the kind of radio would make. And then it turned into a soft moan. Was James asleep? Then I heard it, the laugh from my nightmare. That horrible laugh. I sprung up from the bed, grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I rushed over to James's room and creaked the door open. I tried the light switch, but it wouldn't come on. I took a step in and could feel the warm, thick liquid on my feet. Suddenly, James's nightlight came on and I could see the absolute horror laid out in front of me. James's body was nailed up on the wall, the nails piercing through his hands and feet. His chest was cut wide open and his organs hung down to the floor. His eyes and tongue had been removed, along with most of his teeth. I was disgusted. I could hardly believe that this was my baby boy. Then I heard it again, the soft, desperate moan. Fuck. Then I heard it again, the soft, desperate moan. James was still alive! My baby, my poor baby, in so much pain, barely clinging to life. I ran across the room and vomited on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by a I ran across the room and vomited on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by a horrible cackle coming from behind me. I spun around while Damn it. What is this, a fucking Creepypasta speedrun? I spun around while still wiping bile from my mouth. Then out of the shadows emerged the fiend responsible for all this horror, Laughing Jack. His ghost white skin and matted black hair hung down to his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes surrounded by black rings. His twisted smile revealed a row of sharp, jagged teeth, and his skin didn't look like skin at all. It almost looked like rubber or plastic. He wore a patchy black and white clown outfit with striped sleeved and socks. Shouldn't it be sleeves? He wore a patchy black and white clown outfit with striped sleeves and socks. His body itself was grotesque, his long arms hanging down past his waist, and the way he His body itself was grotesque, his long arms hanging down past his waist, and the way he was poised made him look almost boneless, like a rag doll. He let out a sickening laugh as if to let me know he was pleased with my reaction to his work. He then turned around slowly in front of James and began to laugh even more at the horrific sight he had laid out. That was enough to shake me from my terror. I snapped, "Get away from him, you bastard!" I rushed at the monster, raising the knife above my head and stabbed down at him. But as soon as the knife touched him, he disappeared in a cloud of black smoke. The knife passed right through and pierced James still. The knife passed right through and pierced James's still beating heart, splashing the warm blood on my face. No, what have I done? My baby, I killed my baby. I immediately fell to my knees, and I could hear sirens in the distance growing louder. My boy, my sweet baby boy, I promised Daddy would protect you, but I failed. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. Police soon arrived to find me in front of my son, still wielding the knife covered in my baby's blood. The trial was short. Insanity. I was placed in the... I was placed in the Ferropolis house for the criminally insane, where I had been for the... I was placed in the Ferropolis house for the criminally insane, where I've been for the past 2 months. It's not so bad here. The only reason I'm awake now is because someone is playing Pop Goes the Weasel outside my window. I'll talk to the orderlies about it I'll talk to the orderlies about it in the morning. Jesus fucking Christ. Ah! Yep. I'm not gonna bother editing any of this. It's gonna take way too much time to edit all of this out. Fuck. This is just gonna be a blooper-filled one. Fuck it. A married couple who had just returned from their honeymoon decided to buy a house. The couple was very happy because they managed to get the house at a very cheap price. It was in a nice neighborhood, close to the city, and just a short walk from the shopping center. One day, the husband was walking down the hall when he spotted a red crayon lying on the floor. The couple didn't have any children, so the husband wondered where the crayon... The couple didn't have any children, so the husband wondered where the crayon had come from. Perhaps the previous residents left it behind, he said to himself as he casually threw it in the trash. The next day, the husband came home from work to find another red crayon lying in exactly the same spot. He was very puzzled and decided to ask his wife about it. The wife grew pale in the face when he brought it up. She told him that every day since they first moved into the house, she'd been finding red crayons when she was cleaning. They were always lying in the same spot at the end of the hallway. The husband was standing in the hallway, wondering about this weird phenomenon when he began to notice something was not quite right. The hallway was too short. He tapped on the wall at the end of the hallway and heard a hollow sound. Curious, he began peeling off the wallpaper, despite the protests of his wife. Behind the wallpaper, they found a pair of sliding doors. It was as if someone had carefully hidden the entrance to a closet or a small room. The husband discovered that the sliding door had been nailed shut. He got a hammer from his toolbox and began prying out the nails one by one. After pulling out the last nail, he slowly opened the sliding door to reveal the small hidden room. Looking inside, they saw that the white walls of the little space were covered with words scribbled in red crayon. Over and over again were the words, "Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out. Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out. Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out." Mario has been a gaming icon for decades and has been in more games than can be counted. Although no year in recent memory has gone past without some type of Mario games being released. Well, some type of Mario game, singular game, come on, learn to read. Although no year in recent memory has gone past without some type of Mario game being released, serious fans will remember the nearly decade-long drought of original Mario platformers. From 1977 to 2005, there was only one new Mario platformer released. From 1977 to 2005, there was only one new Mario platformer released, Super Mario Sunshine. During the second part of this drought, after Sunshine's release, come on! During the second part of this drought, after Sunshine's release, the mysterious Super Mario 128 was the main focus of the fanbase. No concrete information was given on the why? No concrete information was given on the game, and eventually series creator Shigeru Miyamoto claimed it had simply been a series of test concepts that were never intended to be an actual game. The mystery faded from memory as the Mario drought finally ended, and most people forgot about the game that had once been the center of every Mario fan's imagination. The Mario drought corresponded with a bad era for Nintendo in terms of console sales. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube. Oh shit. This is why you shouldn't record creepypastas while you have a cold. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube did not have the financial success of earlier Nintendo Entertainment Systems and Super Nintendo, or the later Wii. That is some bullshit. That is some fucking bullshit right there. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube did not have the financial success of the earlier Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo or Wii. What the fuck? That is bullshit. Bullshit. Anyways. Okay. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube did not have the financial success of the earlier NES or SNES, or the later Wii. For a very proud company that relied solely on video games to make money, this was quite upsetting for the higher-ranking employees that were attached to the company and felt for a very proud company that relied solely on video games to make money, this was quite upsetting for the higher-ranking employees that were attached to the company and felt its success or failure reflected on them personally. Nintendo started working on a sequel to the 1966 release. Why? Nintendo started working on a sequel to the I keep wanting to say 1969 instead of 1996. I don't know why. Nintendo started working on a sequel to the 1996 release Super Mario 64 shortly after the game was released, but during the late 90s, it became clear that Nintendo was not winning the console war. The Super Mario 64 sequel was restarted from scratch, since the company believed that it was not a substantial enough improvement of the original to turn the tides of the market battle. Seeing the generally more realistic and violent games on Sony's PlayStation, the market leader, Nintendo considered making a Mario that was closer in tone to what the public seemed to want. There was quite a bit of internal conflict over There was quite a bit of internal conflict over how far to go with this new direction, and the new Mario was clearly not gonna be ready until Nintendo's next console, the GameCube. The only hint of this was released. I can't read. The only hint of this that was released to the public was a comment by Miyamoto that he thought Mario and Elite. Fuck. The only hint of this that was released to the public was a comment by Miyamoto that he thought Mario and Luigi should act more like grown-ups in their games for the then soon-to-be-released GameCube. The new Mario project was ultimately split into two games, Luigi's Mansion, which reflected the darker tone that many felt the series should turn to, although it was still toned down a bit compared to what some Nintendo executives and developers wanted, and Super Mario Sunshine, which went in the complete opposite direction. Both were released within a year of the GameCube, and Nintendo felt confident that the new system and Mario games would return them to their former glorious market leader. Yeah, that would never happen. As those familiar with gaming history know, they didn't. The GameCube did even worse in market share than the Nintendo 64, and the GameCube did even worse in market share than the The GameCube did even worse in market share than the Nintendo 64, and the mass market's taste shifted even more towards violent, realistic games. During this period, the somber mood at Nintendo intensified and the darker Mario project was revived, this time codenamed Super Mario 60... wait, what? I was about to say 64. Fuck. This time codenamed Super Mario 128. It isn't clear exactly what happened at Nintendo during this period. As we know, nothing called Super Mario 128 was ever released As we know, nothing called Super Mario 128 was ever released or publicly shown. The source that revealed the internal strife at Nintendo during the later N64 era refused to discuss what was happening during the time of the GameCube's failure, but released a prototype of Super Mario 128 online that can be played on the Wii Homebrew channel. The fuck is that? The following is a recollection of my time playing it. The game was clearly an early beta. The title screen was nothing but white text saying Super Mario 128 against a black background. There was no options menu or save file selection either. After the title screen, the game started. Bowser's laugh from... Hey! Bowser's laugh from Super Mario 64 looped in the background while a plain text box displayed this dialogue. Mario, I have taken Princess Peach and she will not live to see the... Fuck. Mario, I have taken Princess Peach, and she will not live to see the sunrise tomorrow unless you take her place. You know what to do and where to go. Do not try to stop me unless you want to hasten her death. Jesus, that's dark. The game certainly was going for a darker tone. After I made the text box go... After I made the text box go away, I was thrust right into the gameplay. The first thing I noticed was Mario's character model. His body was as detailed as in Super Mario Galaxy, although a little more realistically proportioned, but his head was taken from his SM64 character model. Obviously his design wasn't finished yet. The setting was a sky level. There were some simple platforms floating in the air. The rest of the area was just blue sky with several clouds scrawling in the back. Scrawling? The fuck is that? The rest of the area was just a blue sky with several clouds scrolling in the background. The clouds seemed more realistic than the usual cartoony puffs in Mario games. The clouds seemed more realistic than the usual cartoony puffs in Mario games. They were quite graphically impressive. There was no music or full voice samples from Mario, but there were sound effects and grunts when he jumped. The jumping was more subdued than in other games. Mario didn't jump as high as he usually did and had little control over his movement in the air. The different types of jumps in every 3D Mario weren't present. I played through the whole level. There was nothing especially notable about the gameplay. Enemies didn't seem to have been added yet. I just jumped from platform to platform and it wasn't very challenging. As I went through the level, I noticed the graphics gradually changing. The sky became more and more cloudly. What the fuck is that? The sky became more and more cloudy until it was entirely composed of clouds, and the cloud background gradually turned to a dark gray. After this, it started to rain. I reached a small platform with a toad on it. It looked like the Super Mario Galaxy model. When I landed on a platform, a dialogue appeared. We don't want you anymore, Mario. You don't belong here. Just give Bowser what he wants. Die. After the text box went away, I no longer had control of Mario. Mario just stood there for a while, then turned around and walked off. Mario just stood there for a while, then turned around and walked off the platform. His body seemed to go limp as he fell. Eventually, it was revealed that there was a realistic, modern city under the sky. The buildings looked neglected, but there were people on the street. Mario hit the ground with a realistic thud, but he didn't explode or show any visible wounds. He just laid there. The people in the city just kept walking by, ignoring Mario, although I thought I saw a few... The people in the city just kept walking by, ignoring Mario, although I thought I saw a few glance at him with cold, somewhat angry expressions. This went on for a few minutes, and eventually people stopped appearing. Mario got up. I was back in control, but he couldn't jump at all and had reduced walking speed. Well, I mean, after a fall like that, of course he would. The large buildings of the city didn't appear to be interactive, so I just kept walking down the street for a while. Eventually, I found a small house that seemed out of place among the larger buildings. When I approached the door, Mario opened it. The screen went white and some black text appeared. House of Torn Memories. This seemed to be the level title. When I pressed the button, the screen faded back to Mario. He was inside the house from before. Everything seemed bigger than it should. It wasn't gigantic, but scaled as if Mario was a very small child. The house was filled with normal objects covered in dust and signs The house was filled with normal objects covered in dust and signs of neglect. There were no people on the ground floor, just things like broken lamps and rotting food. I found a door that opened to a set of stairs going down, leading to a basement. In the basement, I found a dilapidated couch and a broken TV. However, what really caught my attention was what was on the couch. Two skeletons that appeared to be children, judging by their size. Due to the scale of the house, they were still larger than Mario. I was starting to get really disturbed by now. I was starting to get really disturbed by now. How had a Mario game containing this been programmed to this extent? I went up to the skeletons and tried pressing buttons to interact with them or the TV, but nothing seemed to happen. I was about to turn around and look elsewhere when I was nearly scared to death by I was about to turn around and look elsewhere when I was nearly scared to death by a deafeningly loud crash coming from the game. What appeared to be Bowser seemed to have broken through the floor from below and landed in front of Mario. I say appeared to be because this was nothing like the way Bowser is usually rendered. The reptilian monster in this game had Bowser's basic brownish yellow and green color pattern, but looked far more threatening than any Bowser model I'd seen before. It was not proportioned like the body I knew. What? It was not proportioned like the Bowser I knew. Its arms and legs were far longer in relation to its body, and ended in razor-sharp claws. The green shell didn't look like it had spikes. The green shell didn't look like it had spikes glued on. They were more jagged and organic looking, with the same dark green color as the rest of the shell had. The face had small but intense pure black eyes and a mouth full of jagged teeth that took up far more of the face than it should have. Mario was cowering in fear from this thing. A dialogue box appeared. You've kept me waking. What? You've kept me waiting long enough, Mario. I will taste flesh soon. Will you finally surrender, or does Peach have to die? I still didn't have control. Mario just stood there, shivering for several seconds before nodding his head. Bowser impaled Mario with his claws. There was no blood, but it was clear from the animation and sound effects that the sharp digits There was no blood, but it was clear from the animation and sound effects that the sharp digits of Bowser's hand had gone through Mario's body. In one swift motion, Bowser dragged Mario up to his face and bit his head off. Again, there was no blood or graphic details left behind on Mario's neck, just Mario's character model being destroyed. The screen faded to black, and in white text, another level name appeared. Mario's eternal home. Fuck. Mario's character model was whole again when the level started. It was the only thing on the screen besides the black background. It was floating as if in space. I could somewhat control it, but I felt more like I was deciding the general direction in which Mario would tumble than fully controlling him. What? I can't read. There is no was. As I drifted towards no apparent destination, voices faded in. They were echoing, deep voices telling Mario that he was worthless, that the world no longer had any use for him, and everyone would do better off if he was dead. High-pitched crying was layered onto the voices after a bit. It sounded like it was supposed to be Mario's cries. This really disturbed me, and I found myself fighting back tears. For reasons I couldn't understand, this was affecting me on an emotional level. The voices and aimless wandering went on for several minutes until I spotted a light gray speck in the distance. I moved towards it. It took a very long time to reach, and grew closer at a much slower rate than it should have. When I was close enough to make it out, I saw that it was a tombstone. It was very plain. It was a very plain one with cracks in several places. When I got right next to the tombstone, I could see writing on it. I turned off the system right after reading it. I'm not going to play the beta or hack or whatever this was again. There was a single word written on the tombstone. Innocence. Jesus, that was dark for a Mario related thing. So, to end this fucking garbage video, why not cover the worst creepypasta ever made, fucking Sonic.exe, because why not? It's gonna be filled with bloopers anyway, so, and that is one that I can rightfully say that I'm never gonna take seriously anyway, so that doesn't matter. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. Jesus Christ. Alright. I'm a total Sonic the Hedgehog fan, much like everyone else. I like the newer games, but I don't mind playing the classics. I don't think I've ever played glitchy or hacked games before, though I don't think I want to play any after the experience I've had. It started on a nice summer afternoon. I was playing Sonic Unleashed. I liked how you get to explore the towns in it. Yeah, from what I've seen, Sonic Unleashed is a great fucking game. Wish I could play it, but hey, I don't think it's on PC. So fuck. Until I noticed out of my peripheral vision that the mailman had arrived and put something in my mailbox, as usual, and left. I paused my game to go see what I got in the mail. The only thing in the mailbox was a CD case for computers and a note. I took it inside. I looked at the note first and realized it was from my dear friend Kyle, let's just call him that, whom I hadn't heard from in 2 weeks. I know that because I recognized his handwriting, though what was weird is how it looked. It looked badly written and scratchy and somewhat difficult to read. As if Kyle was having a hard time writing it down and did it in a hurry. This is what he wrote. Tom, I can't take it anymore. I had to get rid of this thing somehow before it was too late. And I was hoping you'd do it for me. I can't do it. He's after me, and if you don't destroy the CD, he'll come after you too. He's too fast for me. Please, Tom, destroy this godforsaken disc. I can't take it seriously. Please, Tom, destroy this godforsaken disc before he comes after you too. It's too late for me. Destroy the disc and you'll destroy him, but do it quickly. Otherwise he'll catch you too. Don't even play the game. It's what he wants. Just destroy it. Please. Kyle. Well, that was certainly weird. What? Well, that was certainly weird, even though Kyle is my best friend and I haven't seen him in 2 weeks. I didn't do what he asked me. I didn't think that a simple gaming disc would do anything bad to him. After all, it's just a game, right? Boy, was I wrong about that. See, the thing is, Tom, when you get instructions from someone that frantically begs you to do something because something's gonna go bad if you don't, well, guess what? You do that thing. That is common fucking knowledge, man. I feel like Tom is written to be stupid. Anyway, I looked at the disc and it looks like any ordinary computer CDR disc, except it had black marker written on it. Except it had black marker on it written Sonic.exe. And it was much unlike Kyle's handwriting, meaning that he must have gotten it from someone else, like a pawn shop or eBay. When I saw Sonic on the writing of CD, I was actually excited and wanted to play it, since I'm a big Sonic fan. That's a big mistake then. I went up to my room and turned on my computer and put the disc in and installed the game. When the title screen popped up, I noticed that it was the first Sonic game. I was like, awesome, because like I said earlier, I like the classics. The first thing I noticed that was out of place was when I pressed start. There was a split second when I saw the title image turn into something much different. Something that I now consider to be horrifying before cutting to black. I remember what the image looked like in that split second before the game cut to black. The sky had darkened, the title emblem was rusted and ruined. The Sega 1991 was now Sega 666, and the water had turned to red like blood, except it looked hyper-realistic. Oh my god. You know, it's been a while. It's been a couple years since I've read any creepypastas that's even mentioned anything hyper-realistic. This really is old, isn't it? It's like from 2007 or something. I don't know. Jesus. But the freakiest thing that was in that split second frame was Sonic. His eyes were pitch black and bleeding from two glowing red dots. I'm bleeding with two glowing red dots staring right at me. And his face and his smile had stretched wider up to the edge of his face. I was rather disturbed about that image when I saw it, though I figured that it was just a glitch and forgot about it. After it cut to black, it stayed like that for about 10 seconds or so. And then then another weird thing happened. The save file select from the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 game popped up. I was like, what the fuck? What's this doing in the first Sonic game? Anyways, then I noticed something off. The background was dark. The background was the dark, cloudy sky of the Bad Stardust Speedway level from Sonic CD, and there were only 3 save slots. The music was that creepy Caverns of Winter music from Earthbound, and it only was extended and seemed to have been in reverse. And the image for the save file, where you see a preview of the level you're on, it's just a red static for all 3 files. Jesus fucking Christ. This thing is just filled with cliches, isn't it? I'm glad I have never read this thing and I'm glad I've literally never done anything else but heard of this fucking pasta until today. Because I remember back in 2017 when I started, not on this channel, I had an old channel that I started back in 2017 where it was just like, I read some creepypastas, 2 of which, Laughing Jack and the Deep Web one, you actually heard today. And I was actually considering maybe looking this one up and covering it, but I'm glad I didn't, because now I can sit here and make fun of it. What freaked me out more was the character select. It only showed Tails, Knuckles, and to my surprise, Dr. Robotnik. Now I was sure something was up. I mean, how can you play as Dr. Robotnik in a classic Sonic game for crying out loud? That's when I realized that this wasn't a glitchy game, it was a hacked game. Yeah, it definitely looked hacked. It was really creepy, but as a smart gamer, I wasn't scared. Really? But as a smart gamer, I wasn't scared, or at least I tried not to be. I told myself that it was just a hacked game, and there's nothing wrong with that. Anyways, shaking off the creeped out feeling, I picked file 1 and chose Tails when I selected and got started. The game froze for about 5 seconds, and I heard a creepy pixelated laugh that sounded an awful lot like that Kafka guy from Final Fantasy, but before cutting to black. The screen stayed black for about 10 seconds or more. Then it showed the typical level title thing, except the simplistic shapes were different shades of red, and the text only showed Hill, Act 1. The screen faded. The screen faded in, and the level title vanished, revealing Tails in the Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. The music was different, though. It sounded like a peaceful melody in reverse. Because it always has to be reversed, doesn't it? Anyway, I started playing and had Tails start running like you would in any of the classic Sonic games. What was odd was that Tails was running along the level. What was odd was that as Tails was running around... fuck me. What was odd was that as Tails was running along the level, there was nothing but flat ground and a few trees for 5 minutes. That was when the peaceful music started to lower down into slow, deep tones very slowly as I kept going. I suddenly saw something and I stopped to see what it was. It was one of the small animals lying dead on the ground bleeding. That was when the music started to slow down. Tails had a shocked and saddened look on his face that I never saw him have before. So I had to move along, and he kept that worried look in his face. As he kept moving, I saw more dead animals as Tails moved past them, looking more and more worried as the music lowers and he moves past more dead animals. Jesus Christ, let me fucking breathe. I was shocked to see how they all died. They looked like somebody killed them in rather gruesome ways. A squirrel was hanged on a tree with what appeared to be his entrails hanging out. A bunny that had all 4 limbs torn off, and a duck had his eyes gouged out and throat slit. Jesus fucking Christ, how can you even animate this in a fucking... What is Sonic? Is it 16-bit or 8-bit? Fuck, man. How can you even fucking visualize that? I felt sick to my stomach when I saw this massacre, and apparently so did Tails. After a few more seconds, there were no more animals, and the music seemed to have stopped. I still kept Tails to continue. What the fuck does that mean? Hold on, I need I'm gonna fucking stand for the rest of this shit. Jesus Christ. I still kept Tails to continue. What do you mean you still kept Tails? You still kept Tails going? After a minute passed, the music stopped. Tails was running up a hill, and then he stopped. It wasn't until I saw why. It wasn't until I saw why Sonic was there on the other side of the screen with his back Sonic was there on the other side of the screen with his back against Tails with his eyes closed. Tails looked happy to see Sonic, but then his smile faltered, obviously noticing that Sonic wasn't responding to him, if not acting as he was totally oblivious of Tails' presence. Tails walked slowly towards Sonic, and I noticed that I wasn't even moving my keyboard to make him move, so this had to be a cutscene. Again, in an 8-bit or 16-bit game, like in a fucking old platformer like that, did you have cutscenes back then? Wait, no, I've played Sonic CD. So yeah, but maybe not in the first games, I don't know. I haven't played those. Suddenly I began to have a growing feel of dread as Tails walked closer to the Sonic to get his attention. I felt that Tails was in danger and something bad was going to happen. I heard faint static growing... I can't talk for shit. I heard faint static growing louder as Tails was but inches away from Sonic and stopped and stuck his hand out to touch him. That foreboding feeling in my gut was growing stronger, and I felt the urge to tail. Fuck this pasta, man. You know what? Fuck it, I'm gonna sit down again. Fuck this shit. Ugh. I'm getting annoyed. That foreboding feeling in my gut was growing stronger, and I felt the urge to tell Tails to get away from Sonic as the static grew louder. Suddenly, in a split second, I saw Sonic's eyes open, and they were black with those red glowing dots, just like the title image. Though there thought there wasn't a smile. What? This one's filled with cliches and grammatical errors. Man, I don't know how people sit through this shit. I mean, back then, even like people were making fun of it even back when it was made. So, when that happened, the screen turned to black and the static sound went off. It stayed black for about 7 seconds, and then white text appeared, forming a message saying, "Hello, do you want to play with me?" At this point, I was creeped out. I didn't want to continue the game, but my curiosity got the better of me when I was taken to a different level with the level title now saying hide and seek. This time I was in the Angel Island level from Sonic 3, and it looked like everything was on fire. Tails looked as though he was scared out of his wits this time. He actually looked at me and made frantic gestures to me as if he wanted to get out of the area he was in as fast as possible. I was starting to get freaked out by this. I mean, Tails was actually breaking the fourth wall, trying to get me to get him out of there. So I pressed down on the arrow key as hard as I could and made him run as fast as he could. A pixelated version of the creepy theme when you meet Shadow at the Ark as Robotnik from SA2 was playing as I made Tails trek through the desolate forests. I can't get through this pasta. A pixelated version of that creepy theme when you meet Shadow at the Ark as Robotnik from SA2 was playing as I made Tails trek through the desolate forest. Jesus Christ, trying to help him escape from whatever he was trying to run from. Suddenly, I heard that creepy laugh again. That awful Kefka laugh right after 10 seconds had passed as I helped Tails run through the forest. And then I started seeing flashes of Sonic popping everywhere on the screen, again with those black and red eyes. Jesus Christ, learn to place your commas correctly. This is getting annoying. The music changed to that suspensefully drowning jingle. Oh my god, I'm slowly going insane. The music changed to that suspenseful drowning jingle as I see Sonic behind Tails, slowly gaining up on him, flying. Sonic wasn't running, he was actually flying. The flying pose his sprite was making looked very similar to Metal Sonic's flying poses in Sonic CD, except it was just Sonic and he had the black and red eyes again. Only this time he had the most deranged looking grin on his face. He looked as though he was enjoying the torment he was giving the poor little fox as he gained up on him. Suddenly when Tails tripped, another cutscene, the music stopped and Sonic vanished. Tails laid there and started crying for 15 seconds. The scene was rather upsetting to watch, and I kinda teared up myself. But then Sonic appeared right in front of Tails, and Tails looked up in horror. Blood started to come down those blackened eyes of Sonic's as a grin slowly grew from his face, and as a grin slowly grew? What? From his face as he looked down at the horrified fox. I could do nothing but watch. Just in a split second, Sonic lunged at Tails right before the screen went black. There was a loud screeching noise that only lasted 5 seconds. The text returned, only this time it said, "You're too slow. Wanna try again?" And then that god-awful laugh came with it. Oh, god damn, I can't. I'm gonna finish this fucking pasta, and then I'm gonna stop, because I can't take it anymore. I can't take any more pastas for a while. Nah, I'm kidding. I'm probably gonna end up recording some more after this that I'll publish individually for just that I'm gonna try to do seriously. Maybe not today, because I'm too full of energy and I have nothing. So I like, fuck it, you know. Where was I? Oh yeah. I was so shocked by what had happened. Did Sonic murder Tails? Nah, he couldn't have. He and Tails are supposed to be best friends, right? Why did Sonic do that to him? I shook the shock off as I was brought back to the character select. to the character select. The save file that Tails had was very different. Okay. Tails was no longer in the box itself, but in the TV screen itself, which was flickering with that red static. Tails' expression scared me. His eyes were black and bleeding, his orange fur had gone black, and he had an expression of anguish on his face. Trying to ignore it, I picked Knuckles next. The laugh came again, and the screen cut to black again, and stayed there for another 10 seconds. This time the level said, "You can't run." I was really freaked out by now. I couldn't really tell if this was a glitch or a hack or some kind of twisted, sick joke. Or anything, really, but despite my fear of what happened next, I kept playing. The next level looked much different. It had the ground of scrap. It had the ground of the scrap brain zone, but the sky background looked more like the main menu. It had the dark reddish cloudy sky. But it was the music that creeped me out the most. It sounded like Geiger's themes right after it. It's Geiger's. I haven't never played Earthbound. I wanna, but fuck it. Geiger's theme right after you beat Pokey in Earthbound. I also noticed that Knuckles looked afraid just like Tails did. Those though not as much. More rather, he looked a little unnerved. He broke the fourth wall, just like Tails, and looked as if he wasn't sure about what was going on, but I made him move anyway. He ran down the straight pathway in this dark level, and as he did, the screen started to flicker red static a couple times, and then that maddening laugh came again. Then after a couple seconds of running, I noticed several bloodstains on the metallic ground. I felt a growing sense of fear, again, thinking something horrible was going to happen to Knuckles. He looked nauseated, walking down this blood-stained road, but I still kept him going. Suddenly, as Knuckles ran, Sonic appeared right in front of him with those black and red eyes, and then red static appeared again. When the static vanished, showing nothing but black screen with text saying "Found you." I was now scared. Sonic found Knuckles already. What was going on? Can you tell I'm not taking this seriously? Anyway, red static came again, and then it was back to the level. Knuckles looked like he was panicking, and Sonic was nowhere to be found. And this time, that high-pitched squealing from the Silent Hill, that high-pitched squealing from the Silent Hill 1's final boss was playing. But how? Was this some kind of boss battle with Sonic? I hope to God it wasn't, honestly. Suddenly, Sonic appeared right behind Knuckles in what appeared to be pixelated black smoke. I made Knuckles turn and then punch Sonic, but Sonic vanished in black pixelated smoke before I could even land a hit. That terrible laugh went off again. But then Sonic appeared behind Knuckles again, then I made him punch again, and Sonic vanished again. Laughing. Knuckles was panicking even more, and I felt like I was going crazy. Sonic was practically playing with us. He was playing a sick, twisted little mind game with me and Knuckles. Another cutscene played as Knuckles fell to his knees and clutched his head, sobbing. I felt his agony. Sonic was actually driving us both crazy. And then, in a split second, Sonic lunged at Knuckles and the screen went black with another distorted screeching noise that lasted for at least 3 seconds. Then, another text message appeared. So many souls to play with, so little time. Would you agree? That should say wouldn't you agree, by the way? Fuck you. What the hell? Just what is going on? I started to think Sonic was actually trying to talk to me through the game, but I was too scared to think that. Well, why wouldn't you think that at this point? It's obvious, man. I was brought back to the main menu, and this time, the second file box had Knuckles on the TV screen. His red fur had darkened to a reddish gray. His dreadlocks were dripping with blood, and his eyes were black and bleeding too, and he had a look of sadness on his face. I began to think that those are the actual characters trapped in those TV screens on the save files, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. So, I shut off the game and took a break. I took a nap. I wish I hadn't, because then I began to have the most disturbing nightmare. I was in a pitch black darkness, though I was under the light given off by a lamp that hung above my head. I could hear the cries of Knuckles and Tails nearby. They were saying stuff like, "Help us," and "Why did you give us to him?" and "Run away before he gets to you." The cries died out as I then heard Sonic laugh. His laugh, it sounded a lot like the distorted Kefka laugh. You're a lot of fun to play with, kid, just like your friend Kyle, though he didn't last long. I was scared and looking around for the source of the voice. It won't be long now until you join him and all my other friends. I saw him walking towards me, flickering in and out in several directions. You can't run, kid. You're in my world now, just like the others. Ugh. I can't with this cliche dialogue. I'm actually dying. This fucking pasta is killing me because of how bad it is. Jesus. When he grabbed me and I saw his bleeding black and red-eyed... When he grabbed me and I saw his bleeding black and red-eyed, grinning face, I woke up with a fright. After a couple hours, I decided to continue playing the game. I don't know why, but I had to know. I had to figure out why this was happening, so I turned on the computer, turned on the game, and selected Robotnik next. I still thought that was wacky, playing as Robotnik, but anyway, the level title appeared again, and this time it was just an ellipsis, which I found really freaky. This time I was in some kind of hallway. It didn't really look like it was from any of the classic Sonic games, so it had the pixelated style. Oh, Jesus. The floor was shiny and checkered. The walls were dark grayish purple with animated candlelight, and a few dark bloodstains here and there. And there was a dark red curtain hanging above on the top part of the screen. Every 12 seconds or so, that red curtain sways very slowly, but whenever you're playing the game, you can barely see it move. The music was oddly pleasant, a piano playing a rather sad yet peaceful song, but I knew better. This was the song that played in Hill Act 1, only it wasn't in reverse. Robotnik didn't look entirely nervous like Tails and Knuckles did, but he did have a suspicious look in his face, as if he was just a bit paranoid. He did a little animation when I just left him standing. He turns his head to the left and then to the right at least twice and then shrugs at me, as if he has no idea where he was or what was going on. Even though I was scared out of my mind about what was going to happen, I had Robotnik continue Jesus. Even though I was scared out of my mind about what was going to happen, I had Robotnik continue onward. Jesus Christ. He did his usual running animation, when you've beaten him at the end of the classic Sonic game and you chase him, as we continued going through the hallway. Then I stopped at a long flight of stairs leading downward. Now, I was nervous. Even Robotnik seemed unsure of himself, though I pressed onward. As I led Robotnik down the stairs, I noticed that the walls had gotten darker and more reddish. The red torches are now an eerie blue. And then we landed onto another hallway. This one was longer than the last one, or at least it felt like it. And then we headed down another flight of stairs. This one was much longer, at least 1 full minute. Jesus Christ. And then I heard that horrible Kefka laugh again, and the music slowly faded out until it was quiet. As it did, the walls turned more dark red, and the torches were a black flame now. When Robotnik landed on the third hallway, I noticed how he now looked really creeped out, though he tried to hide it. I couldn't blame him, I was scared too. Suddenly, Sonic popped up right in front of Robotnik the same way he did Knuckles and then the red static. The red static lasted for about 15 seconds, and then it showed me a most unpleasant image. The image showed a hyper-realistic Sonic. standing in the darkness where you can only see his face while his head and torso fit in the black. And when I say hyper realistic, I mean he looked so real you can actually see the lines on his blue fur, and you can actually feel the fur. This fucking pasta, man. His face, oh god, he had the most horrifying smile I'd ever seen. And that's saying something considering I saw that image at the start of the game. His eyes are wide and black, and once again crying blood, which also looked hyper-realistic. Why? And then there were two small glowing red dots in those black eyes staring right at me, as if staring into my mind. His grin was wide and demonic. It literally stretched to the sides of his face like a Cheshire cat, except Sonic had fangs, very sharp fangs. As if cats doesn't. Like, wait. Except, like, it literally stretched to the sides of his face like a Cheshire cat, except Sonic had fangs, because cats don't have fangs, apparently. Very, very sharp fangs, much like the werewolf's teeth, except much more vicious looking. Somewhat yellowish, and from the looks of it, he had stains of blood and small bits of flesh on his lips and fangs, and if he ate some animal. I stared at that gruesome image for a good 30 seconds, never taking my eyes off it. I felt as if he was actually looking at me, smiling. That face, it just took 10 seconds for it to etch itself into my brain for good. I feel like if the image is as bad as you described it, it would take way, way, way less for it to etch itself into your mind. It would take like a millisecond. And then the screen flickered with red static again 3 times, and on the 3rd time I heard the Kafka laugh, except this time it sounded distorted, demonic even. It went back to the image again, except this time... It went back to the image again, except this time there was the text again, though it was messed up, but it was pretty much one of the most horrifying things I looked at since I had this game. I am God. It was when I read the message that, while looking at Sonic, when it hit me, I realized it right there and then. This Sonic was a monster. A pure evil, sadistic, all-powerful, nightmarish, demented monster, and all of his victims, including Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik, and possibly Kyle, are just his little toys, and the game is the very gateway into his chaotic, nightmarish world and the very hell his victims are trapped in. Suddenly, in an actual split second, I screamed as Sonic lunged at the screen, screeching loudly with his mouth wide open to a natural length, revealing nothing but a literally spiraling abyss of pure darkness before the red static came again, this time much louder and distorted, so loud that it hurt my ears. I yelled and grabbed my ears as the red static screeched for a good 7 seconds. Then it stopped and showed nothing but a black screen. I sat there, staring at the black screen. One last text came up. "Ready for round 2, Tom?" The Kefka laugh, now sounding more clear as if Sonic was right behind me, played 3 times as I looked at that text box in shock and confusion. And I'm looking at this creepypasta in complete boredom. Then I got booted back to the main menu, and this time the 3rd save file had a TV image of Robotnik in the same tormented state as Tails and Knuckles. Robotnik's skin turned a dull gray, his mustache drooped and had blackened, his glasses broken, blood is coughing from them, and he had a mere dead-like expression on his face. I looked at Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik and cried a bit. I pitied them for the agony they're going through. They were forever trapped within the game, forever tormented by that horrid hedgehog and always will be. Then the computer shut itself off. I couldn't turn it back on no matter what I did. I sat there for maybe 25 seconds, horrified by what had just happened. Sonic is the very embodiment of evil. He tortures people who plays his game in more ways than one, and then when he gets bored, he drags you into the game. Literally drags you into hell where he can play with you always as his toy. I can't get the image out of my computer. I think it's stuck in there. I mean, what? What do you mean? You fucking... Oh, no, you did manage to turn it back on. I think it's stuck in there, but at least I managed to turn it back on now. After I sat there for 25 seconds, I heard a voice right behind me like a whisper. "Try to keep this interesting for me, Tom." I turned around to see where the voice came from, and what I saw made me scream. Sitting on my bed, staring right at me, was a Sonic plushie with smiling with bloodstains under his eyes. Oh god, thank fuck, I'm done. I'm done with this shit. Fucking thank fuck. Goodbye. Oyazumi nazai.